There is an endless war of nerves going on inside each of our brains. Read that again. Not a metaphor. Norman Doidge is describing an actual ongoing competition happening right now inside your skull for territory, cortical real estate. And the specific war this video is about is the one over confidence. Two circuits fighting for the same ground, one built from every time you shrank, the other from every time you didn't. Doidge is a psychiatrist who spent years inside the labs where this war was first mapped, watching brain scans of monkeys, stroke patients, and eventually ordinary people, showing territory change hands in real time. He didn't theorize this. He watched it happen on the machines over and over until the scientists who doubted it stopped doubting. Here's what that means for the confidence you don't feel. It was never a trait you were denied at birth. It's a map. And right now, in you, the map for retreat is bigger than the map for standing your ground. Every time you flinch from the conversation, the risk, the room that might judge you, you're not sitting out the war. You're enlisting. You're handing more ground to the circuit that's already winning. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly which circuit has been winning inside you, why the retreat that feels like relief is the mechanism keeping your confidence starved, and the specific, deliberate way to start moving that territory back. Not with affirmations, but with the same wiring law that built the problem in the first place. The war doesn't end, but it can change sides. And tonight, you find out how yours will. Confidence is not a quality, it's a map. Somewhere in your brain, there is a physical region, a cluster of neurons wired together through repetition, that fires every time you consider speaking up, taking a risk, walking into a room where you might not be wanted. And there is another region, built the same way, that fires when you retreat. One of these maps is bigger than the other. That's not a metaphor, that's neuroanatomy. Here's how we know. In the 1980s, the neuroscientist Michael Merzenich ran an experiment that would end up rewriting what we understood about the brain. He sewed two of a monkey's fingers together, so they always moved as one. Months later, he mapped the monkey's brain again. The two separate finger maps that had existed before were gone, fused into a single map because the two fingers had fired together every time for months. Then he did the reverse. Took two fused fingers on a person born with them stuck together and had them surgically separated. Within weeks, one map became two. The signals stopped arriving together, so the brain stopped treating them as one thing. This is the principle Doidge calls, quoting the neuroscientist Carl Jung, neurons that fire together, wire together. And its mirror image, neurons that fire apart, wire apart. Sit with what that actually means. Your lack of confidence is not a personality trait, a genetic hand you were dealt, or a permanent verdict on your worth. It is a map that got built the same way Merzenich's monkey built a map for two fingers stitched into one. Every time fear and a specific situation fired together, the presentation, the rejection, the room that went quiet when you spoke, your brain treated that pairing as information. Repeat it enough times, and the brain doesn't record it as, "this happened once." It records it as, "this is what happens here." A permanent instruction built by nothing more exotic than repetition, which means the map can be redrawn, not through willpower and not through a slogan you repeat in the mirror, through the exact same law that built it, different signals fired together on purpose, until the brain stops trusting the old wiring and starts trusting the new one. But before you can rebuild anything, you need to know precisely where the damage is. Not, "I lack confidence." That's too vague to act on. You need the actual coordinates. So here is where you start. Take the next few days and simply notice. Where do you retreat? Not the big dramatic failures, the small, reflexive ones. The message you don't send, the opinion you don't voice in the meeting, the invitation you decline before you've even considered it. Each one of those moments is a signal flare, showing you exactly where your retreat map is most heavily wired. because avoidance is never random. It follows the terrain that's already been built. Map your avoidance, and you've mapped the circuit you're actually dealing with. What you'll find, if you're honest about it, is unsettling. The moments you've been calling just who I am are really just the places where the war has already been decided. And what happens in those moments, what your retreat actually does to the brain underneath it, is where we go next. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You think avoidance is rest. It isn't. When you skip the hard conversation, decline the opportunity, let the silence sit instead of speaking, some part of you files that as a break, a pause. Nothing gained, nothing lost. That belief is the single most expensive misunderstanding about how your brain actually works. Doidge describes the space inside your skull not as storage, but as territory under permanent siege. There is an endless war of nerves going on inside each of our brains, he writes. And the prize being fought over is cortical real estate. Every skill, every reflex, every emotional pattern is a claim staked on finite ground. Nothing idles. Nothing waits politely for its turn. What isn't actively used gets seized by whatever is. This is what Doidge calls competitive plasticity, and it explains something that should terrify anyone who's ever told themselves, "I'll work on my confidence later." Brain map space isn't reserved for you. It's allocated moment to moment, based entirely on what gets fired. The map for retreat and the map for standing your ground are not separate, peacefully coexisting neighborhoods. They are rivals, splitting a single, limited territory between them. So when you avoid the hard conversation, you are not conserving anything. You are making a payment. The retreat circuit fires, strengthens its claim, and expands, while the circuit that would have let you stay in the room, say the true thing, hold your ground, gets no signal at all, and starts to shrink from disuse. This is why old habits, Doidge notes, are so brutally hard to unlearn. Each repetition doesn't just fail to help. It actively deepens the trench the new behavior would need to climb out of. Here's the piece almost nobody tells you. The moment you choose to flee isn't the neutral moment. It's the loudest one. It's the instant your brain is listening closest, deciding where the territory goes next. Which means the real leverage point in your day isn't some abstract commitment to be more confident. It's the specific 5-second window right before you retreat. The moment your hand hesitates over sending the message, the breath you take before you decide not to speak. That's not a small moment. That's the battlefield. Start there. Not by forcing yourself into every hard thing at once. That comes later, and doing it too soon backfires. For now, just catch the moment. Name it, silently, as it's happening. This is the transaction. This is where I've been paying into the wrong account. You don't have to act differently yet. You have to see it clearly every time it happens for what it actually is, because there's a deeper twist still to come. One that explains why the retreat doesn't just win the war, but convinces you it was never a war to begin with. There's a reason your incapacity feels so real, so permanent, so much like the truth about you. And it has nothing to do with what you're actually capable of. Dr. Bernstein had a stroke on a day that started like any other. He'd operated on 7 patients that morning. Delicate eye surgeries, the kind that demand a steady hand. By afternoon, his left side was completely paralyzed. He couldn't hold a fork, couldn't button his shirt, couldn't press his thumb and first finger together, though he'd once been ambidextrous enough to perform surgery with either hand. He went through the standard treatment, weeks of therapy. Then he was told, in the flat language doctors use when they mean it's over, that his treatment was finished. His arm would not get meaningfully better than it already was. Here is what nobody said out loud, and what turned out to matter more than the stroke itself. The standard post-stroke protocol doesn't force patients to use the damaged limb. It lets them adapt. Bernstein learned, without anyone teaching him, to do everything one-handed. And every task he completed one-handed was a small, invisible vote, cast against the arm that was struggling and for the one that wasn't. Edward Taube, the researcher who eventually treated Bernstein, had a name for what happens in that gap between the damage occurred and the patient gave up trying. He called it learned non-use. The arm wasn't finished healing, it was finished being tried. In the confusing early weeks after the stroke, every attempt to use it failed, and the brain did what brains do with repeated failure. It stopped sending the signal, and the map for that arm began to shrink, not from injury, but from silence. Bernstein went to Taube's clinic with nothing left to lose. The treatment was almost absurdly ordinary: washing tables, lifting cans from shelf to shelf, stretching rubber bands over his weak fingers, writing his ABCs over and over with the hand that used to belong to a surgeon. Nothing dramatic, just his good hand restrained and his bad hand forced back into the war for territory it had already conceded. 2 weeks later, he was writing legibly. Within months, he was playing tennis again. Badly at first, then well enough that no one meeting him would guess which side of his body had once been dead. This is the exact shape of what happens to confidence, minus the stroke. Somewhere in your history, there was a window, a specific failure, a specific silence in a room, where the thing you tried didn't work, and instead of trying again once the moment passed, you filed it as proof and stopped. The capacity didn't die. It went unvoted for so many times that the map shrank, and you mistook the silence for an answer. Which means the question you've been asking, am I actually capable of this, can't be answered by a circuit that hasn't been tested in years. You need your own version of the rubber band and the shelf of cans, something small, low stakes, where the only goal is to send the signal again. Say the honest thing in a conversation where nothing is riding on it. Raise the question in the meeting no one will remember by Friday. Watch closely for what actually happens, not what you feared would happen. Most of the time, what you'll find is discomfort, not disaster. And discomfort is not a verdict. It's a limb, moving again for the first time in a while. But moving it once isn't the same as rebuilding it. Bernstein didn't recover in a single afternoon of trying. He recovered because the retraining had an order, a shape, a deliberate escalation from cans on a shelf to a tennis racket in his hand. That order is the part almost nobody gets right on their own, and it's where we go next. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Shaping. That's the word Doidge uses for what actually rebuilt Bernstein's arm. And it's not what most people assume rebuilds confidence either. The instinct, when you decide to finally fix something you've avoided for years, is to go big. Force yourself into the hardest version of the fear immediately. The confrontation, the stage, the room full of people who intimidate you, and prove, in one dramatic move, that you can do it. This feels like courage. It is usually just a fast way to fail, and failure at this stage doesn't just disappoint you. It refires the exact circuit you're trying to weaken, with more evidence behind it than before. Taube's clinic never worked this way. Bernstein didn't go from a paralyzed hand to a tennis racket in one session. He started by lifting cans from one shelf to another, then rubber bands stretched over his fingers, then the alphabet, written badly, over and over, until it wasn't bad anymore. Only then, weeks later, a racket. Doidge describes the actual mechanism plainly. The essence of the cure is the incremental training, or shaping, increasing in difficulty over time, not exposure, not a leap of faith, an engineered climb. The reason this matters more than it sounds like it should. Every rung of that climb was chosen specifically because it was winnable. Not easy. Winnable. Difficult enough to demand real effort, but not so difficult that the outcome was likely to be failure. That distinction is the entire treatment. A step that produces failure doesn't train the new circuit. It trains the old one more time, for free. So here's what you actually build, starting today. Not a vague intention to be braver. A ladder. 5 or 6 specific situations tied to the exact thing you've been avoiding, ordered from least to most threatening. If the fear is speaking up, the bottom rung might be voicing a small opinion to one close friend. The next, a mild disagreement in a low-stakes group text. Then a question raised in a meeting where the outcome genuinely doesn't matter. Each rung only gets climbed once the one below it has stopped producing real fear. Not zero discomfort, but nothing close to failure. This is slower than the version of yourself that wants results by Friday. It is also the only version that produces a circuit strong enough to survive real pressure, instead of collapsing the first time the stakes go up. Bernstein's rebuilt arm didn't feel entirely normal even years later, but it played tennis, held a pen, ran an office. Not perfect, functional, under load, which is the only test that actually counts. And that's the part almost nobody plans for, the moment the stakes do go up, the presentation that actually matters, the conversation you can't downgrade to low stakes. That's when the old circuit fights hardest to take the territory back. And if you don't know exactly what to do in that specific moment, all the careful climbing gets undone in 30 seconds. That's next. In the 1990s, the psychiatrist Jeffrey Schwartz scanned the brains of people with obsessive-compulsive disorder and found something specific. 3 regions, locked together, firing as one, unable to shut off even after the danger had already been handled. He called it brain lock. And the treatment he built for it turns out to describe almost exactly what happens the moment your confidence gets tested for real. Here's the part that matters for you. Everything you've built through slow, deliberate climbing, the small wins, the ladder you've been working, gets tested hardest, not on an easy day, but on the day the stakes actually rise. The presentation you can't downgrade. The conversation with real consequences. That's the moment the old circuit doesn't quietly concede. It surges, because it's still there, still wired, just weaker than it was. And weaker is not the same as gone. Schwartz's patients faced the same problem in a different form, an urge so strong it felt like fact. His treatment didn't try to argue the feeling away. It gave patients 2 moves. The first is relabeling. The instant the old surge hits, the tightening chest, the urge to shrink, the certainty that you're about to fail. You name it precisely, out loud in your own head. This is not the truth. This is the old circuit firing, not I am about to fail. Just a well-worn pathway is doing what well-worn pathways do under pressure. That distinction sounds small. It is not. It's the difference between being the feeling and observing it. The second move is refocus. Schwartz's patients didn't wait for the urge to pass before acting. They acted anyway, deliberately, toward the behavior they were trying to strengthen. You do the same thing. You don't wait to feel ready. You speak the sentence you were about to swallow. You send the message your hand was hesitating over. The feeling doesn't need to disappear first. As Schwartz put it, it is not what you feel while applying the technique that counts. It is what you do. The circuit doesn't care how confident you felt in the moment. It only registers what fired. This is where the earlier law does its quiet work. Every time you feel the old surge and act anyway, you are not fighting the old circuit directly. You're starving it while feeding the new one. Use it or lose it, running in both directions at once, in real time, under exactly the pressure that used to guarantee your retreat. It won't feel clean the first several times. You'll still feel the old pull, still feel your hands go cold. That's expected, not evidence of failure. Schwartz's patients felt their symptoms for months before the scans showed real change. What matters is only ever the same thing. What fired, not what you felt. And here's what all of this has actually been building toward. Because feelings were never going to be the proof your brain accepts. Something else is. Something your nervous system can't argue with, the way it argues with a thought. That's where we end. Here is the thing about affirmations, visualizations, mirror pep talks. Your brain has never once been fooled by them, and it never will be. Doidge's entire body of work rests on a mechanism that doesn't negotiate with intention. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Not neurons that believe together. Not neurons that hope together. Fire. An action. Taken. Registered as data. This is why the confidence you've been chasing has always slipped through your fingers. You were trying to install it as a belief, when it was never going to form anywhere but in a record of what you actually did. Every ladder you climb, every relabeled surge, every small, honest sentence spoken instead of swallowed. None of that is preparation for confidence. It is confidence, being built the only way it has ever been built in any nervous system. As evidence, deposited one repetition at a time, in a structure that cannot be talked out of what it has already recorded. There's something almost merciful in that. It means you were never broken in some permanent, defining way. You were running a working brain, doing exactly what working brains do, reinforcing whatever gets fired, indifferent to whether what gets fired serves you. The mechanism was never the enemy. It was neutral the entire time, waiting for different input. But mercy is not the same as ease. Doidge calls this the plastic paradox for a reason. The same law that will rebuild you is the law that already built the thing you're fighting. And it will not stop rewarding retreat just because you've decided, today, to stop retreating. The war doesn't end when you understand it. It ends, slowly, rung by rung, in favor of whichever circuit keeps getting fired. That's not a metaphor to feel inspired by. It's a fact to act on, starting with the next moment you feel the old pull and do the smaller, braver thing anyway. So here is what actually changes, starting now. Not your identity, not some fixed truth about who you are, discovered in a flash of insight. Just the next signal you send, the next small vote cast for the circuit you're trying to grow instead of the one you've been feeding by default. Nobody transforms in a session. Somebody eventually accumulates enough of these small votes that the map underneath them looks different than it did. And the person other people call naturally confident is very often just someone standing on a few more years of exactly this. You already know which circuit you've been feeding. The only real question left is what you're going to fire the next time it matters. If this landed the way it should, the video on your screen right now will too. Click to keep watching.